Welcome back, everybody. Ready for another deep dive?
Absolutely. Always ready to dig in.
Well, today we're looking at a story that really has it all. Um, Drama, tough choices, betrayal, and some really fascinating insights into leadership and loyalty.
Oh, yeah.
It's a story from the Bible about King Saul and David, and it all unfolds in 1 Samuel 22.
Right, right.
Okay, so picture this. David, the future king, he's been anointed, but he's also on the run from Saul, who's, well, let's just say not taking it well.
Hey, a bit of an understatement there, maybe.
Maybe. But anyway, David finds himself hiding out in the cave of Adullam. Now, you'd think he'd be all alone, right?
Yeah.
Terrified,
Yeah, I
desperate.
mean, it's a cave, not exactly a palace.
Exactly. But here's the thing. He's not alone at all. He's actually joined by this whole group of people. People who are in debt, some are in distress, some are just, unhappy with how things are going.
Discontented, yeah.
Right. And this ragtag group, they become David's core following, like the foundation of his future army.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Even when he's fleeing for his life, David has this ability to attract people, especially those who are feeling lost or like they don't belong. It says a lot about him.
It really does. I mean, what kind of leader draws people in when they're at their most vulnerable?
Yeah.
Like, what does this say about David?
Well, it suggests to me that he's someone who inspires loyalty, someone who can really connect with people on a deeper level. He's not just a tough warrior. He's someone who understands what people are going through.
And sees their potential, maybe, even when they don't see it themselves.
Absolutely. And I think that ability to connect, to create a sense of purpose, is something you see again and again in great leaders throughout history, especially during times of crisis.
Well, for sure. Think about those leaders who've rallied people to their cause during wars or social movements. It's powerful stuff. But meanwhile, back in the story, we have King Saul going down a very different path.
Yeah.
His paranoia is getting worse and worse. He's convinced that everyone's out to get him, even his own men.
Yeah, he starts accusing people of conspiring with David, making some really rash decisions.
Like that whole incident with Ahimelech the priest.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Tragic. So Saul hears that Ahimelech helped David, gave him some food, and even Goliath's sword. But remember, at this point, David was pretending to be on a mission for the king, so Ahimelech had no reason to suspect anything was wrong.
No, he was just trying to be hospitable.
Right. But Saul, he's so blinded by suspicion, he just refuses to listen to reason. He accuses Ahimelech of treason and orders him executed. And not just him, all the priests in the city of Nob.
It's a chilling example of what happens when power and paranoia mix.
Definitely. Doeg the Edomite was there when David met with Ahimelech, and he's the one who carries out this horrific order. 85 priests slaughtered.
All because of Saul's unfounded fears.
It's a terrible reminder that even those in positions of authority can make dreadful mistakes, especially when fear takes over. But there is one glimmer of hope in this dark story.
Oh, right, Abiathar.
Yeah, Ahimelech's son. He manages to escape the massacre and finds David, tells him what happened. And here we see another side of David, a really important one.
He takes responsibility.
Yeah, he acknowledges that his actions, even though he didn't intend for any of this to happen, put those priests in danger.
It must have been so difficult to face that, knowing that his visit to Ahimelech led to such a tragedy.
Absolutely. But he doesn't shy away from it. It shows real integrity and self-awareness, which isn't easy, especially when you're running for your life.
No kidding.
Hey.
So here we have these two contrasting figures. David showing leadership and compassion even when he's in danger, and Saul succumbing to paranoia and making choices with devastating consequences.
Yeah.
Really makes you think
It does.
about the kind of leaders we need and the choices we all make when faced with difficult situations.
Before we move on, I think it's worth really thinking about what Saul's actions mean. I mean, the massacre at Nob, it wasn't just a random act of violence.
Right.
It was an attack on, well, the religious core of the whole nation.
Oh, that's a good point. And it makes it even more disturbing that Saul seems to be driven by pure paranoia, not any kind of strategy.
Exactly. The priests, they had a really unique role back then. They were the link between God and the people. Offering sacrifices, interpreting the law, providing spiritual guidance.
Yeah, so wiping them out.
It wasn't just about getting rid of individuals. It was like attacking the very structure of their faith.
Whoa. And I bet that sent shockwaves through the entire community.
Absolutely. It creates the sense of fear, uncertainty, makes people question everything.
Yeah, like who can you trust? What do you believe?
Right. It erodes trust, not just in the leader, but in the whole system. It's a scary example of what can happen when fear and suspicion just run wild.
So how does this all contrast with David's approach to leadership? You've talked about how he attracts followers, but what's the deeper significance of that?
Well, with David, even at this early stage, there's this sense of responsibility, of empathy. Remember when Abiathar tells him about the massacre? David immediately owns his part in it. He could easily dismissed it, said it wasn't his fault.
Like it was just collateral damage or something.
Exactly. But he doesn't. He acknowledges the human cost of his actions, even the unintended ones.
It takes a lot of courage.
It does. It's a powerful example of taking accountability, even when it's hard. I think it makes us all think about how often we try to shift blame or downplay our mistakes instead of just owning up to them.
Definitely.
And that willingness to take responsibility, that's a huge part of leadership. It builds trust and it creates space for growth.
Makes sense. It also shows that you're aware of yourself, which is something Saul seems to completely lack.
Yeah, he's so caught up in his own fears and suspicions that he just can't see how his actions affect other people.
Right. He's totally missing the bigger picture.
Exactly. And that's a danger for anyone in a leadership position. When fear's driving the car, it can really mess with your perspective. It can lead you down a destructive path. David's story, it reminds us that real leadership comes from empathy, courage, and putting the needs of others before your own.
Yeah, that's a message that seems to hold true throughout history.
It does, and it's as relevant now as ever. We live in a world where it's easy to get caught up in fear, to see enemies everywhere. But David's story, it shows us that there's another way, one that's based on courage, compassion, and believing in the power of connecting with other people.
You know, it's amazing how this story really shows us not just the good qualities of leadership, but the consequences of making the wrong choices. Saul's paranoia just eats him up, leads to all this destruction, and in the end, well, he loses everything.
Yeah, it really is a cautionary tale, isn't it? Like, here's what happens when fear and distrust take over. You make bad decisions, and ultimately, you self-destruct.
But David, on the other hand, even while he's being hunted, he manages to create this loyal group of followers, and he starts building something that will eventually become a kingdom.
Totally. I think he just gets it, you know? Like, true strength comes from connecting with people, not from isolating yourself and clinging to power.
And he kind of models a different style of leadership, doesn't he?
Yeah.
It's less about control and more about serving others, inspiring them, and helping them be their best.
Exactly. And that message is so important even today. You know, it's easy to get caught up in our own anxieties, to see danger around every corner and just put up walls instead of building bridges.
Yeah, for sure. But David, he shows us there's a better way, a way that's built on courage, on compassion, and on really believing in the power of human connection.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And that's something we can all learn from, no matter who we are or what we do.
So as we finish up this deep dive, what are your final thoughts? What do you want our listeners to take away from all of this?
Well, I'd say think about the things that stand out to you about David's leadership. His courage, his willingness to take responsibility, his ability to build community, even when everything is falling apart around him.
Those are things we can all try to live by, right?
Absolutely. And remember, true leadership isn't about having a fancy title or bossing people around. It's about service. It's about empathy. It's about trying to leave the world a little bit better than you found it.
Well said. And thanks to everyone for joining us on this deep dive. Hope you found it thought-provoking, maybe even inspiring. We'll see you next time. Until then, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep leading with your heart.